Hey, all, thanks for tuning in for another week, another episode. And so let me ask you this question. Are you the person who is walking on eggshells or trying to change someone's triggers or fix them in an effort to make your situation more peaceful? If you're that person, I would encourage you to one, go back and listen to my last episode called Are There Triggers Triggering You? So that you can identify why you're being having a reaction to their triggers. But also, I identified from that video as well that some people try to change other people's triggers so that they can keep that person in their life, try to change what bothers other people by talking some sense into them, quote unquote, and then also try to change themselves in an effort to not trigger that other person. And what I would say to that is I've been there and I've done that same thing. So I was in a relationship where somebody was heavily triggered by a lot of things. And I recognized eventually, not in the beginning stages, but eventually, that that person was triggered by a lot of things because it made him feel safe to control the situation, right? So he needed to control how I acted. He needed to control all aspects of the situation because that made him feel safe. He had abandonment concerns, etc. And what I attempted to do in that space was to mold, shift, and change myself into a person who was less causing or exacerbating of those triggers or less triggering. And so I became a shell of myself, like somebody that I didn't even recognize in that space because I thought, if I can just change, then I can stay in the situation. I don't have to have another failed relationship and he'll be less triggered. And what I found was that one, you can't fully control another person. So no matter how many things I changed, no matter how many eggshells I walked on, there was always more things that were triggering because he wanted to control the entire situation. So I essentially became a puppet. I essentially became somebody who just moved, talked, behaved in ways that were appeasing to him as opposed to being myself and saying, maybe I should investigate whether I need to continue to be here because if my behavior is this triggering to him, then he either needs to be with someone else or heal his triggers before he can be with anyone. And that's not my burden to bear. So I'm not going to focus on that. And so I walked on eggshells. I tried to change his triggers, tried to fix him. And ultimately, I became more hurt and experienced more pain and experienced more trauma myself and needed to be healed because of what I was doing to ensure that he was no longer triggered or in pain. So, what do you need to do when that is the case, right? When you're walking on shells, when you're trying to change somebody or fix them in an effort to make the situation peaceful? First, you have to communicate, right? So, you address the elephant in the room. You say, I notice that you're triggered often by this thing. And I'm just wondering if there's something connected to that. Is it historical because it seems hysterical? And I really would like to understand, come with curiosity. I really want to understand why this thing is so triggering to you. Communicate that if it's something that you are passionate about and it's a hill that you're willing to die on, then communicate that. Like this is something that's very important to me and I can perhaps change the way that I do it, but I'm not willing to let go of it because it's very important to me. One of the things that I had to communicate in that situation was that I love my friends, male, female, indifferent. Like I'm a very loving person to my friends. They know that I love them. I'm very passionate about making sure that they know that I love them. And I'm not willing to let go of that in an effort to make someone else feel less triggered. Now, I can reassure you more, which I made apparent and did, but I can't change who I am as a friend because it makes you feel unsafe that I'm so loving to other people. I can't change the fact that me loving other people makes you feel like I can't love you at full capacity. Like, I don't just have this love bucket that is, there's only a certain amount of love in here. And if I give someone else more, then you get less. Or if I love some of my friends, then it changes the meaning of the way that I love you. That's not the way that works. And so I communicated that, I addressed the elephant in the room, and nothing changed because it was still triggering to him. And I had to hold space for that because you can't change what triggers other people. They have to fix why that's triggering them. And then the second thing that I did was I reflected on it. So when I sat with myself and I said, would you be upset if the same thing happened to you? And the answer to that was no, because that would not upset me. Now, I'm not expecting that person to be like me. But the second question that I asked myself was, are you willing to walk on eggshells around this particular piece of information that you have right now? Because that trigger is data for me, right? Like I can determine that if I'm going to be with this person, that I'm going to have to change the way I love on my friends. And am I willing to do that? Now, it's a little bit different when it's something like, I don't know, a person is triggered by you yelling, loud noises. Could you perhaps work on not yelling so much and not screaming loudly? You could. That could be something that you could work on. That could be something that you're I'm not really attached to or passionate about the loudness or the volume of my voice, right? Like I can change that. But if it's something that you're really, really honed in on and focused on, like if someone says, I'm not really into your religious mumbo jumbo, like I'm not going to go to church with you, like that's something that you're pretty passionate about. So you'd probably have to reflect on whether you're willing to give that thing up. Can you alter it or do you have to give it up? If it's something that you have to give up to stay in that space, then that's something that you really need to consider. Can you live with adjusting it or could you live with eliminating it or changing it? And if that answer is, I'd have to change who I am, then you really need to consider that. And the thing that you really need to consider, which is the third thing, is altering access, right? So if somebody is triggered consistently by something that is very immensely important to you and is something that is super woven into your being and your alignment with who you are, then you need to say, okay, I have to change this person's proximity to me. They cannot be in a position where they feel like they can control, shift, or move me to be more of what they need. And of course, if you're in relationship with somebody and you're in love with that person, then you're going to want to be who they need. But if that requires you to change who you are, then you have to consider whether that is where you're supposed to be. Is that a space or a place or a person that you're supposed to be in the same room as? Because if you have to misalign with yourself to stay aligned with them, then it's not for you. And then when you change that proximity to you, that's not just for your own healing, though it does give you space to do your own healing, but it's also for theirs. Because the reality is, if you're in relationship with somebody and you allow them to control you, change you, move you, alter you with every single trigger that they have, then you're not giving them the space to heal. If you're allowing them to think that every time they throw a tantrum, and that's what those are, adult temper tantrums, let's be honest, if there's every time they're throwing a tantrum, you're changing to accommodate what they need. It's very similar to every time your child comes to the dinner table and says, I don't like this, I'm not going to eat it, and you cook them a different meal. Eventually, you're going to be cooking 8 meals every single night to appease every single person in your family, as opposed to just saying, well, this is what's for dinner. And if you're hungry, you're either going to eat this or you're going to pour yourself some cereal because we're not making a new meal for every single person. It's very similar to that. If every time they throw a temper tantrum, you give them what they need, you feed them more of what they need and less of who you actually are, then what you're saying is, I'm willing to accommodate, move, shift to give you what you need and hurt myself to avoid hurting you, but you're robbing them from the ability to heal those wounds inside of them. And if they don't heal those wounds, they're going to hurt you enough to where you alter their proximity to you, you alter their access to you, and you don't have them in your life anymore. And then they move into a new situation and they have the expectation that someone else is going to do that without ever even healing those parts of themselves. So if you're in a space today where you're walking on eggshells because of somebody's triggers, or you're willing to alter, move, or shift who you are in an effort to appease someone else, I would encourage you to really think about that situation. Think about, have you communicated your concerns? Have you addressed the elephant in the room? Have you said, I realize that this is your situation, with curiosity, not accusation, and then also reflected on whether it's something that you're willing to give up, whether it's something that you're willing to say, I don't need this to still be in an alignment with myself. And once you've done that, Have you really thought about if this person still belongs into your life? Because again, and I will repeat this until I'm blue in the face, if you have to alter who you are and misalign with yourself to align with what they need, or if you have to sacrifice your own joy and peace to give them joy and peace, then that is not the space that you belong in. So I would encourage you today, reach out to me on all social media platforms, send me a DM if you're in that space and you need help getting out of it and navigating it. Remember, share this message with someone that it may break free from their bondage. If it helped you to break free from yours, knowledge listened to and gained and kept to yourself is selfish, but shared with other people it gives them the wisdom to be able to break free from their own bondage and go into a space where they start their healing journey. And once one person starts their healing journey and they become healed, then they can share it with other people, their testimony and the things that they went through to get to the other side, and that causes a chain reaction. So let's get healed, let's break free from our bondage, and let's share the sources that we have in order to make that happen. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you again next time.